Greetings, John here with a look at Firewatch. There's been a lot of talk about Firewatch and its subpar performance on PlayStation 4 over the past few weeks, and with the release of a new patch, we felt it was time to take a closer look. As a narrative-driven adventure game, performance issues run the risk of spoiling the experience, and that's exactly what users had been reporting when the game first launched. So just what was happening in the original version of the game? Well, what we're seeing here is an uncapped frame rate with a double buffer VSync enforced, leading to the game bouncing between multiples of the refresh rate, which in this case is 60 Hz. You can see a lot of variance on the frame time graph as the frame rate bounces between different update rates, and it's really not smooth at all. Our thoughts on the matter are pretty simple here. Capping the frame rate at 30 frames per second would solve many of the consistency issues. The second problem then is actually an issue common with many Unity titles, stuttering and hitching. This could be improved by disabling the autosave in this case, but it certainly doesn't eliminate all instances of stuttering, as you can see here. The final issue with the game lies in the game's implementation of camera acceleration. You could push the stick in one direction and for a moment it barely moves. But just as you're pointing in the right direction, acceleration kicks in and it goes flying. The combination of wild camera acceleration with a highly variable frame rate made for a rather jerky experience. Then along comes version 1.02, and here's where things get interesting. If you look at the patch notes, we do see some mention of controller and frame rate improvements, but it doesn't really spell out what that means for the player. Well, of our 3 complaints with the game, version 1.02 solves 2 of them. First and foremost, the game is now capped at 30 frames per second. The notes do not make mention of this, but that's exactly what has happened, and let me tell you, it makes a huge difference here. Gone are the wild spikes, replaced instead by a generally stable feeling of motion. Of course, that's not to say it's perfect. Some scenes still suffer from drops, as you can see here, but at least it's less variable than before. Secondly, the camera acceleration has been completely fixed. Right stick input is so much more pleasant to use and makes for a better overall experience. The game just feels so much nicer to play. And Campo Santo is still promising further improvements, which hopefully fixes the remaining frame rate drops and stuttering issues. But for the time being, Firewatch is pretty good on PlayStation 4. Yet some users may be wondering how this happened in the first place. Sure, Firewatch is a beautiful game, but it hardly seems to be pushing cutting-edge visuals here. In comparison, The Witness, released just before Firewatch, displays similar visuals at a very stable 60 frames per second on PS4. The truth is, we believe a portion of these issues can be tied back to the underlying game engine itself. In this case, Firewatch is built in Unity, a toolset designed to facilitate easier development of a game, not unlike Unreal Engine or Frostbite. It's easy to understand the appeal of Unity. It's simple to prototype a new game concept, the tools are very friendly to use, and there's a vibrant community out there to tap into. It seems like a great place to build a game. But the way Unity handles certain tasks isn't always optimal. In its current iteration, the engine still struggles with proper threading, which is very important on a platform like PlayStation 4. This of course refers to the engine's ability to exploit multiple streams of instructions simultaneously. Given the relative lack of power in each of the PS4 CPU cores, this is crucial to obtaining smooth performance. There are also issues with garbage collection, which is responsible for moving data into and out of memory, something which can lead to stuttering. When your game concept starts to increase in complexity, the things that Unity handles automatically may not be sufficient when your resources are so limited. Games built in Unity have a long history of suffering from performance issues. Unstable frame rates, loading problems, hitching, and more plague a huge range of titles. Console games are often impacted the most, but PC games can suffer as well. Games that should operate at a higher frame rate can still feel jerky, while others suffer from wildly unstable performance. It's been happening a lot since this generation kicked off, and it's not a good trend. Nearly every major and minor game released on consoles using the engine has suffered from serious performance and polish issues. Unity games which do run well on consoles remain an absolute rarity in comparison. There is some hope on the horizon, however. The latest update of Unity, version 5.4, is scheduled for release on March 16th. Supposedly this will include a number of performance enhancements, including better threading, something very useful for CPU-limited consoles. So clearly, Unity itself is partially to blame for the issues in Firewatch. But Campo Santo itself shares some of the fault. By capping the frame rate at 30 FPS and tweaking the camera acceleration, version 1.02 now provides a great Firewatch experience. But that's not what was originally released. The reality is, Firewatch on PlayStation 4 should not have shipped in this condition. This is a short, narrative-driven adventure game, and it's an amazing experience at that. Yet this isn't the kind of title where users will play and replay the game for months to come. This is a one-and-done kind of thing. If our initial playthrough had been on PlayStation 4 at launch, it could have ruined the entire experience. Things like the uncapped frame rate and control issues were obvious in preview builds shown at various trade shows over the last year or so, yet the game was still released with these problems in full. Thankfully, the team did a remarkable job of turning around and solving some of these issues. The overwhelming majority of console Unity titles with performance issues are never fixed, so the fact that Campo Santo is working hard to make certain that the game is solid on all platforms is commendable. Yet since this is such a narrative-driven game, we just hope it isn't too late for those itching to play. Which almost brings us to the end of this video. In the end, we're impressed with the devotion Campo Santo has shown in fixing Firewatch on PS4, but it's disappointing that this type of release is happening so often with other Unity titles. We can only hope that, with improvements to the core engine in the works, we'll see fewer of these problems in the future. We will certainly be keeping an eye on that. Anyways, thanks for watching, and this is John, signing off.